The CEO mocked the single dad's tiny lot. 60 days later, it was the city's largest auto empire. There were 19 people standing in that parking lot when it happened. 19. Buyers, staff, a few neighbors who had come out to see what all the noise was about. The lot itself held 14 cars, 12 of them used, 2 of them new on consignment. The gravel was uneven. The banner above the entrance had been printed at a copy shop for $37 and was already pulling loose on the left side in the October wind. Then the black SUV pulled in. The man who stepped out was wearing a coat that cost more than most of the cars on the lot. His name was Harrison Cole. He ran Meridian Auto Group, 4 franchise dealerships, a regional fleet contract, and a development arm that had spent 18 months trying to acquire the 2 acres of land the little lot was sitting on. He looked at the banner. He looked at the gravel. He looked at the hand-painted price signs taped to the windshields. He said something to the woman beside him. She wrote it down. People heard it anyway. Then the door of the small office at the back of the lot opened. A man walked out in a canvas jacket. Behind him, a 5-year-old girl in red boots holding a stuffed bear named Bolt. Bolt had a blue ribbon around his neck that she had tied herself. It was crooked. She didn't care. The man's name was Isaac Vane. Harrison Cole did not know that name. He was about to. Don't go anywhere. This one takes 60 days, and it earns every one of them. The lot had a name, Vane Motors, that appeared on the copy shop banner, on a hand-lettered sign by the entrance gate, and on a 1-page website that Isaac had built on a Sunday afternoon in February, using a template and a cup of instant coffee, and his daughter asleep on the couch behind him. The website had a phone number, a brief description, and a sentence at the bottom that said, "Every car on this lot has been inspected, repaired where needed, and priced honestly." That's the whole thing. That sentence had been his wife's idea. Elena had died 14 months before Harrison Cole's SUV pulled onto the gravel. She had been 30 years old. An aneurysm, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that arrives and ends things so quickly that afterwards you stand in hospital corridors, trying to understand how a day can simply stop. She had been the one who pushed Isaac toward the lot. He had been doing mobile mechanic work for 3 years, showing up with his tools, fixing people's cars in their driveways, charging less than he should have, because he could never quite bring himself to charge what it was worth. Elena had said to him one evening that the problem was not the work. The problem was the address. "You need a place," she had said. "A place people come to. A place with a sign." She had not lived to see the sign. He had printed it 8 months after she died. On a morning when Rosie, that was what they called her, though her name was officially Rosa, after Elena's mother, was at his sister's house for the afternoon, and he had driven to the copy shop alone and stood in front of the design screen for 20 minutes before choosing the font. Rosie was 5 years old. She had Elena's mouth and her father's gravity, which is to say, she was often quiet in the presence of complicated things and precise about the few things she chose to say. She had named the stuffed bear Bolt at the age of 3, based on reasoning she had not explained, and that nobody had asked about. Bolt had a rip in his left ear that Isaac had sewn twice. The ribbon around his neck was new. Rosie had found it in a kitchen drawer and made a decision. The lot had been open for 6 months. In that time, Isaac had sold 41 cars. 41. Not one of them had been returned. Not one of the buyers had called with a complaint. 7 of them had sent referrals. 2 had sent cards at Christmas. 1 had driven back to the lot on a random Thursday, just to say the car was still running perfectly, and that he'd told everyone he knew. The lot had 14 cars because Isaac had 14 cars. He bought at auction, at estate sales, occasionally from people who had seen the website and wanted an honest transaction. He fixed what needed fixing himself in the small workshop at the back of the property that had 2 lifts and a tool wall that he had organized with the precision of a man who had learned that you find things faster when they are always in the same place. He priced them by what they were worth, plus what it had cost him to make them right, plus a margin that was modest and non-negotiable. He was not getting rich. He was getting by and building something. And those are not the same thing. But if you're doing it right, one becomes the other. Harrison Cole had been trying to acquire the 2 acres for 18 months. Meridian Auto Group occupied a glass-fronted complex on the main arterial road 4 minutes from Vane Motors, which meant that on a clear day, if you were standing on the roof of Meridian's service building, you could see the copy shop banner pulling loose in the wind. Harrison had not stood on that roof. He had people who reported to him, and what they reported was that the landowner of the 2-acre lot had declined 3 offers of increasing size and appeared to be operating a business from the property rather than waiting to be bought out. Harrison's offer had started at fair and moved over 4 rounds to generous, and then past generous to the range where people usually stopped having principles. The landowner, a retired school teacher named Bernard, 71, who had inherited the land from his brother, had declined each offer politely and with a brevity that suggested he was not conflicted about it. Bernard had told his daughter, who had told someone else, that he liked the young man who rented the lot. He liked the way the young man worked. He liked the little girl in the red boots. Harrison had received this information and processed it as a temporary obstacle. He was 51 years old and had spent 30 years in automotive retail, and he had learned that most obstacles were temporary if you applied sufficient pressure in the right places. He had decided to see the obstacle for himself, hence the black SUV, hence the October morning, hence the woman with the notepad. Isaac came out of the office because he had heard the SUV pull in, and because every person who pulled into the lot was a potential customer, and because that was how he ran things. You heard a car, you went out. He was wiping his hands on a shop cloth. Rosie came with him because she came with him everywhere when she wasn't at nursery, which this morning she wasn't, and because Bolt needed to be where she was, and Bolt had been on the desk in the office next to a cup of tea that had gone cold. Harrison Cole looked at Isaac with the expression of a man assessing something he has not yet decided the value of. He looked at the lot. He looked at the 14 cars. He looked at the banner. He said, "This yours?" Isaac said yes. Harrison said, "Vane Motors." He said the name the way you say something in quotation marks without using your hands. He said, "How many units a month?" Isaac said, "Depends on the month," Harrison said, roughly. Isaac looked at him. He said, "You're not here to buy a car." Harrison smiled. He said, "I'm here because I've made you 3 offers on this land, and the man who owns it keeps citing his tenant as a reason to decline." Isaac said, "He can cite whatever he likes. It's his land." Harrison said, "I'm offering to relocate you. New premises. 6 months covered. We help you find a site." Isaac said, "I have a site." Harrison looked at the gravel. He looked at the banner. He said, "You have 14 cars on 2 acres of unimproved land with a banner from a copy shop." He said it without heat. That was the particular thing about it. He said it the way you state a fact you find mildly amusing. He said, "Come and talk to me when you're ready to be serious about this." He got back in the SUV. He said something to the driver. The woman with the notepad wrote something. The SUV backed out and was gone. Rosie had been standing beside Isaac during all of it, Bolt in the crook of her arm, looking at the place where the SUV had been. She looked at her father. She said, "Was he mean?" Isaac said, "He was busy." She thought about this. She pressed Bolt against her collarbone. She said, "Bolt thinks he was mean." Isaac looked at the lot. He looked at the banner, which was pulling loose further on the left. He said, "Maybe." He put his hand on her hair. "Let's go fix that sign." What Harrison Cole did not know, because he had not looked, because he had assessed the 14 cars and the copy shop banner and concluded that there was nothing further to look into. Was inside the workshop at the back of the lot. Specifically, he did not know about the 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1 that had arrived on a trailer 3 weeks earlier from an estate sale 4 counties over. He did not know what it had looked like when it arrived, which was comprehensively ruined, visually, a fact that had caused the estate executor to price it at scrap. Because nobody who came to look at it had looked past the surface. He did not know that Isaac had looked past the surface for approximately 40 minutes before calling the executor and making an offer. He did not know that the Mustang had been in the workshop ever since, and that every evening after he put Rosie to bed, Isaac came back out to the workshop and worked on it for 2 or 3 hours in the quiet that late evenings in workshops have. The particular quality of silence when the tools are the only sound, and the problem in front of you is the only thing that exists. He did not know about the condition of the engine, which was original and which had been treated over the preceding decades with a consistency of care that the exterior of the car had completely failed to communicate. He did not know that the bodywork, stripped down and assessed properly, was solid where it mattered. He did not know what Isaac had found stamped in the door jamb, a VIN and a build, code that, cross-referenced against a registry that serious collectors maintained with the precision of academic archives, indicated something specific and significant about this particular car's provenance. He did not know any of this because he had seen a gravel lot with a banner and had already decided what kind of story he was in. 3 weeks after Harrison's visit, on a Thursday morning in November, a man named Douglas Farr arrived at Vane Motors in a car that was not for sale. Douglas was 59 years old. He collected American muscle cars, 19 of them, housed in a purpose-built facility outside the city, with the focused, systematic intensity of a person who has found the thing that organizes their life and has arranged their life accordingly. He had been collecting for 26 years. He had a reputation in that world that was composed of 2 parts expertise and 1 part the story of how, in 2009, he had identified a matching number's 427 Cobra at an estate auction, where it had been catalogued as a vintage 2-seater and had purchased it for a figure that still circulated in conversation as a benchmark for paying attention. He had heard about the Mustang from the estate executor, who had mentioned it in a call about an unrelated matter, and Douglas had made a note, and then made a call, and then driven to the lot. Isaac brought him through to the workshop. Rosie came. Bolt came. She positioned Bolt on the workbench at the end nearest the Mustang and sat on the stool beside him with her notebook and drew while the 2 men stood at the front of the car and talked. Douglas was quiet for a long time. He said, "Where did you find this?" Isaac told him. He told him about the estate sale, the executor's price, the 40 minutes of assessment. He told him what he'd found in the door jamb. He said the build code out loud. Douglas looked at him. He said, "You knew what you were looking at." Isaac said, "I knew what I was looking for." Douglas crouched at the front quarter panel and looked at the bodywork. He put his hand on the hood. He looked at the engine bay. He was quiet for a long time, the kind of long that means the person is doing something complex behind their eyes. He stood. He looked at Isaac. He said, "I want to make you an offer." Isaac said, "I'm not selling." Douglas said, "You haven't heard it." Isaac said, "I know what it's worth. I'm not selling. I'm auctioning it." Douglas said, "When?" Isaac said, 6 weeks. Douglas was quiet. Then he said, "Who knows about it?" Isaac said, "You do, and the executor, and my daughter." Douglas looked at Rosie. Rosie was drawing the Mustang from the side, Bolt beside her on the workbench. Douglas said, "She keeping it quiet?" Rosie looked up. She said, "Bolt keeps secrets." Douglas looked at the bear. He looked at Isaac. He said, 6 weeks. He left. He left his card on the workbench next to Bolt. What happened in the 6 weeks between Douglas Farr's visit and the auction is the kind of thing that happens when someone who knows a world tells exactly the right people in it that there is something worth seeing. Douglas did not advertise. He made 6 calls. The 6 people he called made calls of their own, with the particular urgency that information travels in when it is rare and specific, and the window to act on it is finite. By the end of the first week, Isaac had received 4 inquiries through the website. Not the contact form, which rarely got anything serious, but direct emails with detailed questions about the build code, the VIN, the condition of the floors, the engine numbers, the provenance documentation. Isaac answered every email himself. He answered them at the kitchen table after Rosie was in bed. Bolt sat on the table beside her bedroom door in the position she left him when she was sleeping. Standing, facing the hallway, sentinel. He answered them with the same sentences he used for everything. Specific, honest, without performance. By the end of the second week, there were 11 confirmed interested parties. By the end of the fourth week, there were 23. 3 of them were from outside the country. He did not tell Harrison Cole. He did not tell anyone outside the world where the car mattered. He fixed the banner, both sides properly this time, with new clips, and he sold 3 more cars from the lot, and he put Rosie to bed each evening, and came back out to the workshop and worked. The auction was held on a Saturday. Not at a formal auction house. Isaac had looked at that option and found the fees and the detachment from the process not to his taste. He held it at the lot. He cleared a space in front of the workshop. He set up 8 folding chairs and a table with coffee and a presentation board showing the documentation. The gravel was still uneven. The banner was fixed. 21 people came. Douglas Farr. 11 other collectors, some of whom had driven considerable distances. 4 representatives bidding on behalf of parties who were not present. A journalist from a specialist automotive magazine who had heard about it through channels and had come not to bid but to watch. Rosie sat on her stool inside the workshop door with Bolt in her lap. She watched everything. The auction lasted 44 minutes. The final bid was £263,000. It was not the highest price ever achieved for a Mach 1 of this specification. It was not a record. But it was the kind of number that travels. And the way it happened, a gravel lot, 8 folding chairs, a hand-printed documentation board, a man in a canvas jacket who had found the car at an estate sale and priced it precisely and refused to sell early. The way it happened was more interesting than the number, and the journalist wrote a piece. And the piece went in the magazine, and the magazine had readers who had been in this world for a long time, and who sent the piece to other people with messages that said various versions of, "You should know about this man." The journalist had asked Isaac before leaving what he planned to do with the proceeds. He had said, "Buy more cars." She had smiled. She had looked at the lot. She had said, "The whole 2 acres?" He had said, "For a start." Bernard, the retired schoolteacher who owned the land, received his next rent payment on the 1st of December. It was accompanied by a letter, not an email, a letter, handwritten, which was how Isaac wrote things he wanted to mean, proposing a purchase of the land at a price that was fair and that had been calculated precisely, not above market to be dramatic, not below to be opportunistic. The number that a piece of land is worth when someone who intends to stay on it is the person buying it. Bernard called his daughter that evening. His daughter called Isaac the next day. Isaac answered at the workshop. Rosie was on her stool. Bolt was on the bench. The call lasted 7 minutes. Harrison Cole heard about the auction from his operations director, who had heard about it from someone in the trade press. He heard the number. He sat with it for a moment. He called his development team. He asked for the status of the acquisition proposal for the 2-acre lot. His development manager said the landowner sold it. Harrison said, sold it to who? His development manager said the name. Harrison was quiet. He said, the man with the banner. His development manager said yes. Harrison looked at his desk. He looked at the framed photograph of the Meridian flagship on the wall. Glass front, branded signage, 6 salespeople visible through the window. He looked at it for a long time. He said, his development manager said that planning permission had been submitted for a second unit on the adjacent plot, which it turned out Isaac had optioned quietly 3 months ago. That the website had been redesigned. That there was a waiting list for specialist restoration work. That the piece in the automotive magazine had named the lot specifically. And the journalist had described the operation as, his development manager read from the printout, the most honest 800 square feet in the used car business. Harrison said, he optioned the adjacent plot. His development manager said, 3 months ago, before the auction. Harrison was quiet again. The longer kind, he said, get me the planning documents. He said it without heat, the way he said most things. But something had shifted behind his eyes. The expression of a man who has reassessed the category of something, who has moved something from one column to another. He had assessed a banner and 14 cars and stopped looking. He had not looked at the man. He drove to the lot himself, no SUV this time, his own car. He parked on the street outside because the lot was, for the first time since he'd visited, full, every space taken, a customer talking to Isaac near the workshop door, another couple at the far end, looking at a dark green estate. He stood at the entrance for a moment. Rosie saw him first. She was near the office door with Bolt, watching the lot the way she did. Steady, taking things in, not rushing to conclusions. She looked at Harrison. She did not look away. He walked toward Isaac. Isaac finished his sentence to the customer. He looked at Harrison. He waited. Harrison said, I heard about the Mustang. Isaac said, good car. Harrison said, I also heard about the adjacent plot. Isaac said, it came up. Harrison looked at the lot. He looked at the customers. He said, I want to talk to you about something. Isaac said, all right. Harrison said, not an acquisition, a different conversation. He looked at the lot again. At the cars, at the price signs in the windshields, he said, I've been in this business 30 years. I know what I'm looking at when I see it. He paused. He said, I was wrong about what I was looking at. He said it without qualification. No. I may have misjudged. Or perhaps I didn't fully appreciate. I was wrong. 3 words in the flat register of a man who does not say them often but knows how. Isaac looked at him. He said, what kind of conversation? Harrison said, fleet sourcing. I've got 3 franchise contracts, and I've been fighting the same quality control problem with my used vehicle pipeline for 2 years. I know what that car sold for. I know how you found it. He said, I want to talk about whether there's a way to work together. Isaac said, I have a waiting list. Harrison said, I know. Isaac said, and I'm not moving the lot. Harrison said, I know that too. A silence. The particular silence of a negotiation that has not yet started, but where both people understand the shape of the table. Isaac said, I'll hear the conversation. Rosie had come to stand beside her father during the last part of it. She had Bolt in both hands, pressed against her front. She looked up at Harrison Cole. He looked down at her. He looked at the bear. The blue ribbon she had tied, crooked, the rip in the left ear that had been sewn. He said, what's his name? She said, Bolt. He said, good name. She looked at him for a moment with her mother's assessment, the look that came in before the words did. She said, you should have looked properly the first time. Harrison Cole did not laugh, not because it wasn't true, because it was. He said quietly, you're right. Rosie looked at Bolt. She looked at her father. She said, Bolt says it's okay. He says some people need more time. Isaac put his hand on her shoulder. He looked at Harrison. He said, come inside, I'll make tea. Harrison followed him. He crossed the gravel lot. The uneven gravel, the same lot, the same 2 acres he had tried to buy and clear and build over. And he followed the man in the canvas jacket through the door of the small office. The door stayed open behind them. Outside, the lot held 22 cars now. The banner was fixed. The price signs were in every windshield, handwritten, specific, honest. Rosie sat down on the step outside the office door, with Bolt in her lap. She looked at the lot. She looked at the street beyond it, the ordinary street, the city going past at its usual pace. Not knowing or caring what had happened on this particular patch of ground over the last 60 days, she adjusted Bolt's ribbon. She got the bow right on the 3rd try. She looked at it. She put him in her lap and looked out at the lot and the street and the city. Her mother's quiet on her face, her father's patience underneath it. She sat there, waiting for nothing in particular, which is not the same as waiting for nothing.